So that is kind of where we see this left-hand bias from United. And if we have a player like Jadon Sancho on this right-hand side, as opposed to those three, who Juan Mata in his own right is still a good number 10 when asked to be, Greenwood will become a fantastic player more towards this kind of area. But with Sancho on that right-hand side, you either have a situation where he has loads of space on the right-hand side, this whole channel on his own with Aaron Wan-Bissaka supporting, or actually just sitting there and defending and allowing Sanchez to go up and down the right-hand side, or actually attributing to that left-hand bias when he goes into midfield. Hello everyone and welcome to the first ever State of Play YouTube video. This is long overdue. If you guys don't know about us, we basically cover the top 5 European leagues with a sprinkling of the MLS. We like to think of ourselves as the bridge between European football and American soccer. In today's episode, I'm going to be talking about Jadon Sancho and his proposed move to Manchester United and how he could fit in. But before I get into that, please do leave a like down below, please subscribe to the channel, please leave a comment with some feedback, and please click that notification bell button down below to be notified whenever we create new content. For those of you who didn't know as well, we've also been nominated for an award. We'd absolutely love your support. We've been nominated as the best new content creator at the Football Content Awards, and we will leave a link down in the description for you to vote on Instagram, Twitter, and on their website. It's super exciting for us and we'd super appreciate your support. So in today's video, as I mentioned, we're going to be talking a bit about Jadon Sancho, and yeah, he's obviously the most coveted young talent in the world. He's probably going to go for about 100 to 150 million pounds, even in this epidemic period that we're in with COVID-19 and how financially destructive it's been to the sporting industry and football in particular. We've already seen loads of sporting directors come out and say that prices will be lower, bids will be lower, and teams are going to have to be a lot more flexible with their negotiations. But with Jadon Sancho, he probably still carries that premium because he's just that good. And obviously he's English, coming back to Manchester United at such a young age, he's probably going to demand quite a big fee. So obviously he's had 17 goals and 17 assists in this Bundesliga season already without being on penalties, and majority of the time not being on set pieces as well, which is absolutely balmy if you think about it. He's been absolutely fantastic for Borussia Dortmund over the last couple of seasons, and the next step for him is either being their main man next season again or making a blockbuster transfer next summer. The first thing I want to look at is actually where he's played this season. So excuse my awful drawing, but if we actually imagine a football pitch here, in Jadon Sancho's first 5 games of the season, he actually played far more centrally than a lot of people think. So if we actually look at his positioning in the first 5 games of this season, it kind of looks a bit like this. A far cry out from a right winger, which is pretty interesting, isn't it? I mean, if we imagine a right winger's positioning, usually we'd think of them being in this kind of quadrant of the pitch. But with Jadon Sancho, he likes to drift in quite a lot. And this is interesting because, you know, as a right winger who at first was very well known for kind of taking on players and dribbling past players down the outside a lot of the time during his youth, with Lucien Favre, who doesn't really enjoy crossing and getting around the outside and crossing that much, you've seen Sancho go in and take these half spaces in the between the lines, sometimes as you'd see a number 10 do. And one of the reasons that I'm highlighting this is because with Man United, actually, what we see is them have a great left-hand side bias, which I'll explain now. So as you can see on screen, I've tried to draw a bit of a better football pitch. This season, Man United have attacked on the right-hand side 42% of the time. Down the right-hand side, they've attacked 35% of the time, which is pretty interesting. You know, that's still a little bit of a bias, and it mainly stems from their midfielders looking to pass to the left-hand side a lot more often. So if we actually look at what these midfielders are doing, we can actually see why this left-hand bias is happening. Of course, Marcus Rashford being one of the main men on the left-hand side attributes to that. Aaron Wan-Bissaka being a very defensive-minded fullback in a modern era where fullbacks are relied upon to attack a lot also impacts that. But what's really interesting about how their midfielders actually work. So if we look at Matic in this position, Matic passes towards the left-hand side 64% of the times if we look at the last 5 games before COVID, which is crazy, right? And his actual most pass to player or most combinations was with Luke Shaw at left back. So we've got here in Nemanja Matic a guy who isn't very progressive in his passing, but he also passes a lot more to the left-hand side, 64% of the time, which is not too surprising if you think of Nemanja Matic as technically not the greatest player. He's someone who struggles with the kind of closed body pass towards the right-hand side, so it's not actually that shocking that he's decided to go for the left-hand side a lot. If we look at someone like Fred, who ideally would also be on the left-hand side of a double pivot, but he's appeared next to Matic a little bit more on the right-hand side, he's actually also slightly biased to the left, but this time slightly less, 57% for Fred in his last 5 games pre-COVID. And his actual favoured partner to pass to is Bruno Fernandes. And you think Bruno, right? He's definitely not going to be biased to the left because he's, technically a better player, can go both ways, good left foot, good right foot, and also he likes to operate centrally, perhaps cutting in from the left-hand side and passing out to the right. Well, actually, he's also biased, 57% to the left-hand side. And he's never actually played with Marcus Rashford, so that's quite interesting. So we've got Bruno and Fred who like passing to each other, and Fred, maybe his left-hand bias comes from playing in the right side of a double pivot and passing to Bruno, but Bruno actually having 57% is really interesting as well. If we actually look at the most shocking one to me was Scott McTominay. Very adept on the ball, someone who's very comfortable playing the closed body passes inside and also, of course, outside. You'd expect him to maybe pass towards the right-hand side a bit more because of, naturally being right-footed, unlike Matic and Fred, who are both left-footed players. However, McTominay is passing to the to the left-hand side nearly 60% of the time, which is really interesting. So there we have, a midfield quartet or players that can play in those positions, all looking to play to the left-hand side, which is actually pretty interesting. And it means that the spaces that we talked about Sancho occupying, which were more here, if we look at his average positioning and kind of the first 5 games of the season where he started out, there's actually a lot of space to operate in on the Man United right-hand side. And usually the players that pick up those positions are the likes of Dan James and Juan Mata, sometimes Greenwood. Now with Dan James, he's obviously quite limited in his footballing ability. His output isn't amazing and he's not very efficient. Juan Mata, he's aging, he's not exactly a winger. He also likes to go into those inside spaces, inside into the pitch, into that number 10 role. So he obviously attributes to that left-hand side bias whenever he plays. Similarly, Greenwood is kind of more of a attacking player, more of a 10 or a 9 or a combination between both. The Robin van Persie, he likes to call it the 9.5. Greenwood is also going to be cutting inside and looking to play towards that left-hand side. So there we have that kind of bias being caused by limited players on the right-hand side, or players that aren't used to playing or shouldn't be playing on the right-hand side playing there. Alongside that, you have Aaron Wan-Bissaka, who's a very, very good defensive-minded fullback, but he's not exactly very adept going forward. And therefore, you have the likes of Shaw and Brandon Williams, who probably have more to their arsenal from an attacking standpoint, offering a lot more on that left-hand side, especially Brandon Williams, who's come in and done a great job whenever he's been asked to by Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. So that is kind of where we see this left-hand bias from United. And if we have a player like Jadon Sancho on this right-hand side, as opposed to those three, who Juan Mata in his own right is still a good number 10 when asked to be, Greenwood will become a fantastic player more towards this kind of area. But with Sancho on that right-hand side, you either have a situation where he has loads of space on the right-hand side, this whole channel on his own with Aaron Wan-Bissaka supporting, or actually just sitting there and defending and allowing Sanchez to go up and down the right-hand side, or actually attributing to that left-hand bias when he goes into midfield, when he goes into that kind of number 10 space. This is super interesting, and it allows Ole Gunnar Solskjaer a lot more flexibility if this deal is to be done. It also means that if you're an opposing tactician, opposing coach, and you're looking at these stats in front of us and you're thinking, wow, okay, all we have to do is put a very defensive-minded right midfielder and a defensive-minded right back and a good sweeping, strong, fast centre-half on the right-hand side of the defence, and we can actually cope with that left-hand side bias. With Jadon Sancho, it's very hard to kind of occupy yourself with Marcus Rashford, Bruno and Martial drifting towards that left, and also having an absolute bona fide superstar on the right hand side. It's very, very difficult to coach against a setup like that where you have such adept attacking players on both wings. We've seen it with Liverpool, with Mane and Salah, and I think with Jadon Sancho and Marcus Rashford, you could see Man United replicate something like this if the deal is to be done. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit next about how United could line up with Jadon Sancho in their team. So I think what we'll most likely see from Manchester United next season, if Jadon Sancho is to arrive, is the 4-3-3 or the 4-2-3-1 or some sort of hybrid between both. Solskjaer has gone for the 4-2-2 diamond, 4-4-2 diamond at points in this season. And he's also gone for a 5 at the back, 3 at the back formation, especially when playing those big teams at home or away. However, I think that's due to limited amounts of personnel when we look at players. So if we imagine Jadon Sancho lining up on this side with Martial and Rashford. In a 4-2-3-1, you'd imagine Bruno being here as the 10 or the attacking 8, with potentially, if Pogba stays, Pogba and McTominay as the double pivot. That would probably be Man United's best formation in a 4-2-3-1. And if we actually look at 4-3-3, which would be exactly the same from an attacking standpoint, in those players, you could actually have a situation where McTominay drops to a 6 on his own, or you maybe go for the more defensive-minded Matic or even Fred. You could actually have Pogba on the left-hand side and Bruno on the right. As 2 8s in a 4-3-3. Obviously this would be a lot more attacking, there'd be a lot more responsibility on the defence there and be covering 6, but if you played 2 maybe quite defensive-minded fullbacks, let's say Wan-Bissaka and potentially Luke Shaw, if you ask him to stay a bit more back and defend more, then you could actually see a situation like that, especially when United are chasing the game or they are looking to attack when they have a lot of possession. Obviously Pogba is quite adept defensively as well. He's probably quite underrated in that regard. In France's national team World Cup win, he was that cornerstone with Kante and that double pivot in the midfield. And also Bruno is no slouch either. He's got a lot of defensive abilities from a pressing standpoint and also tracked backs quite a bit. So that could definitely happen and isn't impossible. But yeah, I think that's all I've wanted to kind of talk about in this video, the left-hand side bias and how Sancho could fit in. I really do think that if he does go to Man United, he could elevate them massively, especially talking about that left-hand side bias that Man United have. Having Sancho in that team makes them a lot harder to defend against, because you don't only have to look at that left-hand side anymore. And those Man United midfielders will stop being so biased to the left-hand side because they have Jadon Sancho to go to here, either McTominay, Bruno, or Sancho. And even Rashford cutting in, you could see him playing the ball a lot to Sancho as well. And especially with these two liking to go that way, Bruno slightly liking to drift towards the left-hand side, we could see Sancho have a lot of space in this side of the pitch, which could be, breathtaking and horrible for some Premier League defences. If you guys did enjoy that, please do leave a like down below. If you guys want to see more content on the State of Play YouTube channel, please subscribe down below. If you guys want to be notified whenever we release content, please do hit the bell button. If you guys want to check out our podcast, you don't want to see our faces, then check out the State of Play podcast on all your podcast applications. We'll leave that link in the description down below as well. Thank you very much for watching and hope you guys have a great day.